Hello and welcome back, geography students. Today we're going to focus on another aspect of writing, evidence sentences and analysis sentences. We should have already learned about claims. If you have not yet, make sure that you go back and watch that claims video before you watch this one because it's going to set up the foundation to understand this one as well. You should have two things open in front of you right now. Number one is this video, and number two is this document. So if you do not have this document open yet, it has been assigned by your teacher. Pause the video, make sure that you get this document open while we're watching the video so you can complete it while we go. I'm going to go ahead and put this into present mode so it's easier for us to see. So like I said, today we'll be working on evidence sentences and analysis sentences. We already focused on claims. Remember in our last slide, we talked about the whole structure of the essay. These evidence sentences and analysis sentences will be in your body paragraphs. So, as far as our format goes, remember that everything needs to always line up or to match or to correspond with each other. So our main claim that we talked about a subject, an opinion, and the two key topics that you bring up. Our subclaims each focus on one of those key topics. Remember that order is important and that it does matter. And our subclaims are also made up of a topic, opinion, and two key reasons. The only difference is that in our subclaims, those two key reasons come from our evidence. So it's really hard to write our subclaims if we don't already have evidence sentences in mind and evidence sort of picked out. The reason being that these two key reasons, this green part that's highlighted right here, come directly from the evidence sentences themselves. So once you have picked out two pieces of evidence that you think are going to be a really good way to prove whatever argument or point that you're making in your essay, you will kind of summarize those things and put them into the reasons. Obviously, you won't just restate the entire quote or repeat your entire evidence sentence. There wouldn't be a point to that. We're going to go over today sort of how to summarize those and make that subclaim really good and those evidence sentences really good as well. So a little bit of format review. Remember, if our main claim was on deportation, we might say deportation is the most efficient and logical solution to the issue of illegal immigration in the US, as it will ensure the safety of Americans and boost the economy, right? So we have all of our key components. We have talked about ensuring safety of Americans and boosting the economy. So we know that our first subclaim needs to be about the safety of Americans. That will be our first body paragraph. Our second subclaim will have to be about boosting the economy, and we'll get into that for our second body paragraph, right? Since the order comes in that way. Our subclaim then needs to make sure it's talking about the safety of Americans. So how will deportation help the safety of Americans? The deportation of illegal immigrants will provide safety for American citizens, okay? And then we have our two key reasons that are based on our evidence by reducing crime and preventing terrorism. So then we know that we have our first evidence sentence that gets specifically into how does it reduce crime. Give me some statistics, give me some numbers, give me some facts from experts, right? Find a quote that proves it reduces crime. And then secondly, preventing terrorism. So again, we need some kind of factual evidence about how it's going to prevent terrorism. Just to make sure we totally understand this, remember this is our first key reason in our main claim, ensuring the safety of American citizens. So that better be what we're talking about in our first body paragraph. Our subclaim is kind of like our topic sentence, right? It's going to talk about whatever we argue in that first body paragraph. So again, it's focused on the safety of Americans. Then we talk about reducing crime, which means that directly is going to correlate to our first evidence sentence, and then preventing terrorism, which is directly going to correlate to our second evidence sentence. Notice that these are pretty short, general kind of overviews of what the evidence sentence is going to talk about. The evidence sentence is going to go way deeper and way more specific into how we reduce crime and how we prevent terrorism through deportation, right? But as far as the evidence or the subclaim goes, it's just a general overview. So we could just say short things like reducing crime, preventing terrorism, right? We don't need full-on statistics or facts. We're going to save that for the evidence. The subclaim should be more general. The evidence should be more specific. So we're going to take a second and do some examples. Remember, the format of an evidence sentence requires that you have a transition, you have a contextual lead-in, you have a quote, and you have a citation. We should have done this in English already. Some examples of transition words: you can start by saying, for example, for instance, in conclusion, additionally, furthermore. There are tons of lists if you just look it up online for transitionary words. The only caution here is to make sure that if it is your very first evidence sentence, you are not saying things like finally or in conclusion. A better word would be first, right? Something like that. So make sure that it does go in order and that it flows with the essay. You shouldn't be saying next if you don't have something that comes next, right? So just think about it chronologically. Your contextual lead-in for this class is going to be a little bit shorter than it had to be in English. In here, we only focus on the who and the what. So you basically want to say who the quote is about or who is saying it. And then the what is kind of just summarizing the subject or summarizing the topic, really just letting us know who said this quote, what's the subject of it, what's it overall about. It can be a little shorter, and we'll get into exactly what that can look like. The quote is whatever quote you're taking from the articles. We haven't started reading those yet, but once we do, you'll know what they are. And then finally, the citation is always either the author's last name. If there is not an author that you can see, it's the article title, okay? And it will go after the parentheses, and then you'll have the period go after your citation. Alrighty, so again, here's our formula up here, just so we remember. Here is a sample. So we would say, for example, in the article, Top 10 Reasons for Amnesty, John Robinson shows how illegal immigrants help the economy when he claims that illegal immigrants are the backbone of the economy and work the jobs most Americans refuse to work. So pause the screen for a second, see if you can identify the transition words, the contextual lead-in, the quote itself, and the citation, and then we'll check to see if you were correct. So take a second and pause the screen, see if you can find those. Alrighty, let's see if you were correct. We have our transition in green, right? For example, we have our contextual lead-in where we talk about, hey, here's the title of the article, here's the person who wrote it, and here's the subject of what he's writing about, right? He's showing how illegal immigrants can help the economy. Okay, so that's our subject, that's our who and our what. And then here's our direct quote, and finally our citation at the very end, which is his last name, since we know what his last name is. Getting into analysis and what it should do. Your analysis, sentence 1, should infer what has not been specifically stated. Don't simply repeat whatever you just said in your evidence sentence, or else there's no point in doing it. What's the point of even writing that, right? So make sure that you are explaining it in more detail, giving the main idea, maybe defining something that your reader might not know that it says in your evidence sentence, bringing up what it means, some other facts about it maybe, right? To kind of shed some more light on it, give some more background, really tell us what it's saying. Then your AS2, so remember you always have 2 sentences of analysis. Your second analysis sentence is going to connect to your overall argument. So you need to state how the evidence proves you are correct. So the first sentence is explaining the evidence. The second sentence is saying, hey, this evidence proves that I am right and that my argument is correct because blah, blah, blah. And a good way to do that is to say, this proves amnesty or deportation, whatever you're arguing, is the best because, and then you go into it, okay? So good analysis, again, is always going to give us some more background, some more kind of light on the matter, okay? So here was our evidence sentence again, right? The same one that we used before. It talks about how illegal immigrants are the backbone of the economy and work the jobs most Americans refuse to work. So our first sample AS might say, many Americans do not want to take these low-paying jobs like manual labor, landscaping, domestic service jobs, even though these services are essential to the economy. So you're providing more info, right? You're telling us, here's some of these low-paying jobs. Here's some examples. Most Americans don't want them, just like the quote is telling us, even though they're essential. So you're saying it's still important, right? So this is not simply restating what the evidence said. It's giving us some more information and kind of shedding more light on it. Then our second AS is going to be about proving we're correct. So Robinson proves amnesty would be the most beneficial answer to illegal immigration because immigrants would fill these jobs, ensuring that there's not labor shortages and that there's enough goods and services to provide for the American population, right? So you don't just repeat the quote. You say, here's why the quote proves I'm right. It proves that amnesty is the best solution here, okay? So what we are going to do now is work on this document. I'll move over to that tab so we can take a look. Remember, you have some tips up here about what your ESs should be, what your ASs should be. Remember, there's always 2 analysis sentences for 1 evidence sentence. The very first thing you're going to do is look at some samples. So you're going to see a sample subclaim right here. This one's about amnesty being the best. This one's about deportation being the best, right? So we're arguing all sides. Then you're going to look. Here's a sample evidence sentence. It tells you this evidence sentence is wrong. You need to explain why, okay? So you need to take a look, remember what the evidence sentence is supposed to do, how it's supposed to be formatted, all that kind of stuff we just talked about in the video, and you need to say why it's incorrect. Here's some sample analysis that goes with it. You need to say why it might be incorrect, okay? And then here's another evidence sentence. You need to say why it is incorrect this time. More analysis, say why it is incorrect. So this whole first section right here, all of it is an example of what not to do so that you know what not to do. This sentence format over here is correct. So you will need to explain why it's good, why it's an effective evidence sentence, and why these are good examples of analysis sentences, okay? So that's what we should be doing in this section. Right here, these are blank just because we already showed you a good example, so we don't really need to, but I just wanted to show you guys that this is how the format is going to stay, okay? Remember, again, that we've talked about this whole thing should be about how amnesty will help, right? This whole format over here should be about how amnesty will help because that's what you have talked about in your subclaim. And you know your evidence sentences should be about money flowing around the country, and the second one should be about keeping hard labor jobs filled. Okay, so again, make sure that your format is always on track with what your subclaim argued. This one we know will be all about deportation and why it's the best, and it will be about your first evidence sentences, keeping more jobs for Americans, and your second would be about keeping money in the United States, okay? Once you are done with looking at the samples, seeing what's good, what's not, so you can kind of get a better idea of how you should be writing your essay, you are going to go ahead and practice writing yourself. We have not read the articles yet, so you do not have quotes. That is okay, we've provided you with quotes to work with, alrighty? So you know right here, this one's about amnesty. This one is saying why amnesty is the best solution. You are going to use this quote in yellow, and you're going to write an evidence sentence. Make sure that you have all the necessary parts, okay? Make sure you have a transition, a contextual lead-in that says who and what, tells us the subject and maybe who wrote it or who it's about, and then it gives us the quote, and then it gives us the citation, which is the author's last name. After that, you're going to write 2 sentences of analysis. Make sure you write 2, it's always 2. That first one should explain more what the quote means. The second one should be about how it proves you are right. Amnesty is correct because blah, blah, blah. You are going to do it again, right? Because every body paragraph will have 2 evidence sentences and corresponding chunks of analysis sentences that go along with those evidence sentences. So your first one will be keeping money flowing around the country. Your second will be about keeping those hard labor jobs filled. You have a quote again, you'll do the same thing. You will do the same exact thing down here, except this is all about deportation. So you will be talking in your evidence and analysis about why deportation is best to support this subclaim. You don't know what you're arguing yet, so try to use this as a chance to practice. Then you might even be able to use these actual sentences in your essay if they're really good. Make sure you get this done on time so your teacher can give you good and timely feedback. It's going to really help you as you continue to write. So again, folks, just remember our format. Remember that everything always has to line up. Remember that our main claim is the major argument we're making. Everything else works in support of that. If we talk about safety of Americans, our first subclaim better be about safety of Americans, and it better say why based on our evidence, and then our evidence better focus on the corresponding parts of each claim. Alrighty, folks, so get to practicing. It's okay if you're not the best at this just yet. You are going to get feedback, and we're going to continue to work on this all week. So do your best and get to writing.